What is darkness but lurking sun? What is wall but enslaved stone? What is glass but tortured sand? What is song but a call to arms? What is hate but jilted love? What is life but death pending?
What is life but death pending? Most games generally don't make me think too deeply until the end, but this one quote at the start of Vampyr just struck me as so profound it instantly grabbed my attention. And it's also true. In just about every way, humans are just here temporarily, which puts into perspective that there's really not that much that lasts. With Banishers, Ghosts of New Eden being released very soon, I went back and looked through some of the games Dontnod made and found Vampyr. Considering the vibe it gave off and what looked to be a good story-focused game, it had my interest. So without further ado, let's get into it. The visuals for Vampyr are really well done for the most part. There's this whole atmosphere and vibe that's been created which really captures not only the somber and dreary feel of old London, but also the dark and ominous nature of vampires. Graphically, the world and details spread throughout is honestly really amazing in my opinion.
Well, you know,
there's a certain quality about the whole city and atmosphere that's very evident, and it actually feels like the world's its own character. Like, when given the chance, the game really does shine in its own right, and although it may not be a technical marvel, it's still gorgeous to look at and really adds to the depth of the atmosphere. The character models and enemies are also well done for the most part, but I do have to say that there is something funky that happens from time to time. It could be something to do with the lighting, but I'm not entirely sure. There's moments where faces and details look blurred out or like they haven't loaded in correctly. It's not terrible, just a bit distracting.
I have sworn to feed only upon the flesh of the dead. It is now my sacrament.
When it comes to art style, this game definitely ticks all the right boxes for me. There's an almost comic-like aesthetic which ironically adds some maturity to the game and fits with the whole tone quite nicely. The hand-drawn visuals spread throughout the 7 chapters help to give it a great vibe and handles the often gritty subject matter quite well without being overly grotesque. I should mention that I think part of what makes it work so well, however, is the impressive voice acting and writing.
It is transmitted through the blood via violent biting.
Like, I'm not even sure why, but Vampyr actually remind me a lot of Dishonored.
But I must know more.
It could have been the world setting or the art or graphics, but something about this game really gave me that feel.
Until then, all shall die, for that was her final wish.
Okay, the music. The feel of the music in this game is pretty well summed up in its main theme. The use of the more orchestral score means there's a huge variety of sounds adding to the experience. The thing is, it's not necessarily all working in harmony. In fact, it often sounds out of place, which helps to add that sense of eeriness and unease that perfectly matches the game's tone. Like, there's a particular point in the main theme that gives you a certain discomfort and reminds me of that infamous Crone's theme in Witcher 3. Now, obviously there's quite a few different themes throughout the game, each with their own tunes that work really well, but I think the main track definitely captures the vibe of the game the best.
Ascalon does not approve of lone wolves who bring unwanted eyes to our pastures.
So your name is Ascalon?
When it comes to the voice work for this game, I feel it's pretty hard to cover without mentioning the writing.
You seem unwilling to drink, to listen, to learn.
There's a certain level of detail and quality about the writing for this game that really helps to bring the story to life.
You waited for my return.
I told you, Dr. Reid, I was a man to be trusted. Did you have words with the poor Harriet?
Obviously, the narrative is only part of it, and the actual voice work is amazing.
It is within me to take your words as truth. I want to, but I must know more.
There is an astounding amount of characters and dialogue written into the game considering its size and scope, and each one of those characters is voiced.
Tasty rats.
I know, I saw one.
I found some of the actors to be portraying multiple roles, but for the most part, each of the NPCs feels unique in their own right, and it's definitely very well done.
Listen carefully.
In fact, one of the details I've noticed is that even though the overarching voices are obviously English, there are different regional and district accents that come through as you visit each borough.
My name is Charlotte, sir.
Fuck, you're so blind!
Having said that, there is this guy,
It's a beautiful idea, John.
who I feel is just a bit comical in some of the ways he over-exaggerates, but otherwise it's great.
Oh, good news.
Good news indeed. My. Things are moving quickly.
Hold your tongue, newborn, or I'll crush you like a maggot.
You've let the beast consume you.
Finally, a touch of lucidity.
Now, moving on to gameplay. Vampyr to me is still very much an RPG game. It's definitely not one that's heavily focused on the actual action and combat though, and as a result, those traditional gameplay focused gamers will probably quickly get bored. I mean, the combat isn't incredibly deep, but I found it enjoyable and the movement felt fluid and responsive. There are quite a few weapon and ability options available for the player to work through though. There are a few skill builds and some min-maxing is involved to get the most out of your abilities, but it's not necessary. In fact, I actually found myself consistently fighting enemies significantly higher level than me, which I believe is a result of the game choices I made. I also found that there was a fair amount of variety in the boss encounters. Each of the designs and combat mechanics made things interesting and kept me engaged. The only issue for me though is the auto-targeting, which can definitely mess up sometimes. Like if you haven't cleared an area of enemies, sometimes it will auto-target them even if they're in a different room.
No. There was something more vile in these reactions, something primitive.
The choices in this game will definitely impact both the difficulty and the story. Vampyr's gameplay really forces you into some dilemmas with your decision making, which often boil down to whether you want to murder people and get stronger, or choose the moral high ground but face tougher fights. And for my playthrough, I definitely felt like I had some tough choices to make. As I mentioned in my previous videos, not all in-game choices are created equal. Oftentimes they aren't that meaningful and only serve to guide the player. The choices in Vampyr, however, have enough mechanics built into them that they do indeed impact both the story and your gameplay. I think the role-playing aspect of the game works really well, especially when combined with the consequential choices the player can make. For those that prefer the story-focused and narrative-heavy games, there is a lot here to enjoy. There are plenty of story-impacting decisions and conversational choices that will affect the world. Though I wouldn't say it has a huge impact, there are also definitely dialogue options that won't have the outcome that you might expect.
Fuck 'em. I don't like hospitals or doctors.
Well then, when you go back to Whitechapel, you may find this useful.
What is it?
A pass for a free medical exam by the best nurse available.
The world of Vampyr is not only mysterious and atmospheric, but surprisingly large and deep considering the scope of the game. Being set just after the First World War in a dark and foggy London, there is an air of sadness that hangs in the gloom. The whole vibe really adds curiosity and encourages the player to explore further. And usually when you do, you're rewarded with not only new areas and enemies, but also NPCs that will need rescuing or are related to the broader story in some way. Initially, when I heard about the districts and how your choices will impact characters, I thought this game would be like Shadow of Mordor and the Nemesis system, but it's actually not. Each of the NPCs matter, but the way the game challenges your own morality is really interesting. The whole mood of the game feels like a detective murder mystery crossed with some sort of city management, because you're constantly watching the districts to ensure they stay healthy.
England's most esteemed blood specialist returns to London a vampire.
That word again.
Initially, I wasn't planning on doing all the side quests, but the further I dove into the game, the more I wanted to really see how many of these optional investigations were actually unique and weren't just copy-pasted fetch quests. After putting close to 40 hours into this game and completing all but one, because the old guy died, I realized that no two quests are actually the same. Sort of. And I mean, in terms of gameplay, they're quite similar. But in terms of narrative, they were all different, and the responses you're given will usually lead to some interesting answers. The only issue I found was that there's no fast travel, especially when you consider there are multiple endings for this game. Like, the size of the open world in this game isn't that large, but the amount of time spent moving around just felt tedious, and I'm genuinely baffled why they didn't even add the option of fast traveling. A study done in 2021 by the ESA stated that 80% of gamers are over the age of 18. And as an adult, if I feel like my time isn't being valued, I'm not going to stick with it. I mean, there are just far too many options out there for me to commit to a game that I feel like is wasting my time. Oh, I should also mention this game is now 6 years old, and I still experienced a few bugs. There was a story-related one that seems to be a known issue but hasn't been fixed, a few hard crashes that randomly came up, and some random movement bug where my character just kept running without any keys being pressed.
You aim to unleash another disaster, just like William Marshall did.
No, I'm trying to put an end to it, just like you are.
You're the progeny, aren't you? Where is the monster hiding?
From the outset, the game really flexes how well it's written. Like, the intro and the animation is awesome, but what impressed me most was just how poetic and eloquent it was, and to top it off, the narration was just amazing. Like, listen to this.
What is glass but tortured sand? What is song but a call to arms? What is hate but jilted love? What is life but death pending?
I mean, it's just beautiful. I keep coming back to these quotes and it's just so well done. As you sink your teeth deeper into the game though, you'll also notice that there's little nods to Arthurian legend, Celtic and Welsh mythology, and biblical references hinted at throughout. The game itself also isn't subtle with how it addresses modern day issues either, which I really appreciate. Like, there's actually a lot of social commentary in this game. I mean, most of it's done through the characters and the conversations, but it's done in a way where you really need to dig for them. Like, there's issues ranging from child abuse to PTSD from the war, from class inequality to racial prejudice, from religious fanaticism to human mortality. Like, there really is a lot here.
But no one believes me.
I mean, to me, it just makes the game feel more real and shows how much effort is put into the narrative.
Hell Scourge, son of perdition.
Vicar. Jonathan's no demon. He's just a soul. Returned from the dead.
When it comes to the story, there's a real Jekyll and Hyde aspect to how Jonathan Reid is portrayed, and right off the bat, you know you're not just a typical protagonist. The duality of a good doctor contrasting against a bloodthirsty vampire as a narrative fits really well with the gameplay choices in the game. Like, I can definitely understand some people feel like it's too drawn out, but if you enjoy the story and character-focused titles, I think you'll find value here. The whole game feels like it's got this Jack the Ripper vibe mixed in with some supernatural elements that makes this game stand out as quite a unique experience. What impressed me most though is probably how detailed and fleshed out the lore is in this game. There's a lot of backstory that doesn't feel like just an afterthought, and although the payout at the end might not impress anyone, it definitely has some really cool moments. Look, I really hope Banish's Ghosts of New Eden improves upon this game, because I feel like Vampyr is definitely an interesting game with some deep lore. Like, I think the concept is interesting and it's definitely a worthy AA experience. I mean, the balance may have been a little off between the story and gameplay elements, but I definitely enjoyed my time with it. If you're the type of gamer that enjoys story-rich, narrative-led games with meaningful RPG elements, Vampyr is worth playing in 2024. If you've managed to sit through this whole video, thank you so much for watching. I'm still looking to upload a brand new video once a fortnight, but be sure to let me know what else you'd like to see in the comments. Thanks again for watching. Hopefully, I'll catch you in the next one.